Hi, Chrissy.
Awesome. Awesome. Looking good.
She said, hi, Steve. Good. I love
it. Here we go, man. Got some people here. We've got viewers on YouTube. Welcome, people on YouTube, to our webinar. People in the webinar, welcome to the YouTube webinar. We got people all over the place. I love it. So it's fantastic. It's good to be here. We're gonna have a great hour and a half. If you are here in the webinar, you might want to also open up the Q&A section. It's where we keep our questions coming in. Mike Nelson is here. How great is that?
Nelson.
Very cool. Very cool. We got a good group of people today coming. So that's going to be awesome. My microphone notice my mic. It doesn't want to stay, and it's just driving me nuts. It wants to be over here, and I don't like that. So I'm going to be playing with my mic for a while. But well, it is 4:00, so we're going to go ahead and get going here. I'm so excited to be back with another webinar with two of my favorites, JB and Steve. These guys are some awesome teachers right here that we get to learn from today, and talking about some of the stuff that they're doing within their school district, breaking down the walls of their schools. I love that Steve's rocking the Shifting Schools vest. You can buy those. Well, you can't buy them. There's a limited edition. If you could buy them, they'd be about $1.2 million. But anyway, so it's great. It's great to be here. I'm so excited to be learning from you guys today. I've been waiting all day for this. So I'm just going to turn it over to you. You can introduce yourselves, and looking forward to just talking about engaging students outside the walls of our classroom. Awesome.
Well, I'll go ahead and get ourselves going here and get started. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you to everybody for being here and getting a chance to join us and talk about a topic that both JB and I are very passionate about, and that is just kind of expanding beyond beyond the walls of our classroom to our district and then to our community, and being able to bring our community into what we're trying to teach to our students and get them a chance to experience learning through them as well. So let's go ahead and get started by letting you know a little bit about us. And we're going to go about doing it a little bit different. I'm going to introduce JB, and then he's going to get a chance to introduce me. So I'm excited about getting a chance to work with him, because I've respected JB tremendously for the time that we've been in Enumclaw School District together. But as you can see on the screen, he's been in education for 17 years. Spent 10 years in California, and actually was an instructional coach down there for a while, really with, instructing lessons and helping teachers with being able to design lessons that were effective in their classroom, and also helped to write the 7th, 8th grade English and language arts curriculum. So he's a English language arts teacher at Enumclaw Middle School here, and was a featured speaker for the University of Washington Center for Educational Leadership Series in a lesson that he had done there. So if you ever get a chance to check that out, check it out. But on a personal basis, JB is a tremendously reflective and thoughtful professional educator. And that's, I think, what I respect about him the most. And really, honestly, here's how I would describe it. What's normal to JB, or what he thinks is normal, is extraordinary to all of us. And so he's about as humble as you're going to find, and think that, oh man, what I'm doing is not that big a deal. And the rest of us kind of look at it and go, oh my gosh, that's just amazing. So very, very oriented towards his community, and just kind and empathetic. My daughter just graduated last year. He came to our house to deliver some gifts to some of the seniors that were graduating. He's organized some things to try and help our elementary school teachers around here and give back to them a little bit. So I just respect the heck out of him, and I'm excited to get a chance to present with him. So thanks for doing this with me, JB. Appreciate it.
Steve, those are very kind words. I appreciate that. So, Steve has been in the classroom for 23 years. I don't really know how that's possible, because he doesn't look a day over 23. And as you see on the screen there, he currently is a high school teacher at Enumclaw High School in the social studies business. And this is his first year as technology coach. And, one of the things that I love about Steve is just the fact that, he's always pushing the envelope, and he really is reimagining education, and he really does want the best for his students. And he kind of is a technology coach, but he really is just a coach in general. Like, he's coaching his students. Like he said, I had the fortune of teaching his daughter, and she was one of those kids who I don't know how much I had to teach because of the kind of person that he is and the kind of kids that he raises. And so I'm just excited to be here with Steve, and the fact that he is as a facilitator for Shifting Schools and Reimagine Washington Ed, like he is the right person for the job. So excited to be here with you, and yeah, be doing this webinar.
All righty. Want to give us a little preview, JB, what we got coming up?
Yeah, so like I said, we're excited to be here, and we only have about an hour to share, so we want to be efficient with our time. And so these are some of the objectives that we have as we kind of move forward. So one, we want everyone to just recognize the importance of adding value to their community. And as a part of that, we want us to make sure that we're able to identify strategies for building community within your classroom, within your district, and within your community. And number three, we want to evaluate where this approach actually fits best in your curriculum, right? It's not a one size fits all. It's taking an assessment of where we're at, and some things that need to be considered. And then finally, we want us to consider authentic and practical learning opportunities that will add value to your classroom, to your district, and to your community. And, participants, we just want to continue to thank you again for showing up. We know that everyone's working hard right now, but we really appreciate you here.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll just echo what JB just said. And I want to say thank you to everybody and everything you're doing for students and for families and all the efforts that you're putting in. I know it's not an easy time to be an educator and a professional in our field right now, but we're doing obviously everything we can, and I think we're doing an outstanding job as well. And forgot to mention a minute ago, and Jeff kind of mentioned at the beginning, but Jeff will be monitoring the chat and monitoring that piece. And making sure that we're getting your questions answered. So please feel free to pop those in there and let us know what's on your mind and what you need some help with, or want to get our ideas on some of those things. So we're going to start with just kind of a panel discussion with JB and myself and sharing some ideas. We want to make sure we have time at the end for questions and answers, as well as giving a little bit of an activity for you with some curriculum connections, and then a wrap up and a debrief at the end here. So that's our goal, and that's what we're wanting to do in our time here. So.
Yeah, and so, in order for us to really kind of fully explain why we feel that adding value to our community is really an integral aspect of authentic learning, we really think that we kind of need to start with just this idea of mission. And it sounds oftentimes cheesy in education to talk about the idea of mission. I know schools have missions, they have visions. But what I found is that for a lot of my teaching life, I really kind of walked around identityless, and I didn't really have a clear idea of who I was as a teacher. And it was a few years ago when I started to really flesh out, well, what is my mission as an educator? What is it that I believe, and how do I see myself as a teacher? And so I kind of got this from a guy named Clint Smith, and it really just has fit me. But my mission as an instructor, as an English teacher, I feel, is to teach students to read critically, write consciously, speak clearly, and tell their truth. And everything that I do, once I really have solidified that, the outflow of that, everything that I do, the lessons that I create, the experiences I create, flow from that mission. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I would echo the fact of finding that mission for all of us as professional educators can help guide us to what we're doing and all the different lessons that we do in our classroom. And I have to give JB some credit. I kind of feel the same way. I always kind of bounced around and was on the fringes of knowing what my mission was going to be for most of my career. And he pushes me, I push him, and it's kind of fun. We kind of push back and forth. And so about a couple of years ago, we started talking about missions, and I was able to develop mine. And I think I shared that about last month in the webinar that I did on creating global citizenship and global citizens through technology. But, the idea of developing empathetic global citizens with a passion for service leadership. So this idea of making our students and allowing our students to be globally aware, which also then means locally within our community, which is our focus today, but also being able to then provide some service back to their community and provide that service leadership as well, is going to help to be able to define what we're going to do in our classrooms. So let's go ahead and get to it here, JB.
Yeah, community, it's a big one, especially, think of the state of the world right now, and it's a wonderful place, but we need more community. And so why community? Why expand the walls of our classroom? And for me, that is real simple. And personally, it just gives life to my teaching. It honestly gives life to my teaching. When we think about community, I love people. And so we want to start to think about, what does it mean for us to expand the walls of our district. Like we said before, that overarching piece, we have to have that clear mission, as a teacher. But ultimately, we want to create authentic learning experiences for our students. We want to create authentic learning experiences for our students. And one of the things that I want to make sure that we get clear right now is when we talk about community, we talk about authentic learning experiences. One of the, I think, things that we get hung up on is we think it has to be this huge, get out in the community, change the world sort of piece, when the reality is yes, sometimes it's going to be big. Sometimes we're going to go out and make some waves within the community, but sometimes we're going to think about in smaller steps or in smaller chunks. And throughout this, this webinar, some of the things that I hope to see is build community between student and student. How do we do that? How do we build community between student and parent? How do we build community through student and teacher, and create these authentic learning experiences between student and parent, between student and teacher, and between student and local community? And when we think about creating these authentic learning experiences for student that really are leading to that, a natural outgrowth of that is building student confidence. When students see these learning experiences purposeful, as relevant, as authentic, they can't help but grow their confidence. What I have found is when students are given a task or an experience to tackle that is going to expand not just this school year or not just this class, but it's going to be transferable beyond, they rise to the occasion. They rise to the level of that experience, and their confidence grows. And too, along with that is these opportunities, these authentic learning opportunities, and this growing confidence, it really does begin to foster these positive relationships between students, because we know that we are in this together, right? So within the walls of our classroom, these relationships are being fostered. Within the walls of our schools, these relationships are being fostered. If we do it right, from my experience, you start to see student and parent relationships begin to grow and foster those positive relationships, as well as relationships within the community. So, all of this creates this sense of togetherness, this sense of relevance, and ultimately, all of this is just going to add value wherever your community is. So, anything to add to that, Steve?
Yeah, well, no, I think you did a great job of explaining that. And I also want to make sure we point out, JB and I are both coming at this from a little bit of a secondary slant with being a middle school teacher and a high school teacher. But this is an elementary school level piece that we can do as well. Like when JB mentions building community from student to student or from student to teacher, I mean, that happens at all grade levels. We can talk about, a fifth grader mentoring a first grader, or, community and content of blogs or writing feedback or reading books too. And so you'll see a little bit about that through the webinar as well. But, knowing that our goal is to provide these authentic, rigorous learning experiences that build relationships and build confidence. The next question is, how do we make these connections, right? So, I mean, if we can talk all we want about being into community, okay, and trying to get into the community, but then the next step is the simple logistics of how do we make these connections, right? Where do we make these connections where we can give our students the opportunity to be able to read critically, to be able to write consciously, speak clearly, and tell their truth, like JB is talking about, that is authentic, okay, that is out there, to be able to meet that clear vision that we have. And in order for us to do this, number one, we have to be able to take on, as teachers, we have to be willing to take on the risk of doing this. We have to trust our students to be able to put them into this situation. Like JB said, they will rise to the occasion, right? Rather than keep them in an area where you just know for sure what you're going to get. And then, don't do it alone, do it with somebody else and do it with a partner. And I think that's, we're a testament, JB and I are, of working together to do this, that it's easier to do it in community, in connection with other people. So some of the things that have worked for me, number one, I would say this, and it's the same thing I said in the global citizenship webinar that I did. Keep your eyes and your ears open for any possible opportunity that is there. Like, always be thinking through a lens of, hey, this person might be somebody that I could bring into the classroom, or somehow I can make a connection with this. And, I was even thinking about it today before the webinar, and I just started to think about how some of my classrooms and my classes could work with being able to make these connections. And, something that just comes up in your everyday workings, and you go, that person could be somebody that I bring into my classroom. So even the smallest connection can be of significance. But the connections that we're talking about here is within your school district, right? So that, expanding the walls of your district, but then within our district to the community services that are available, that are out there. And then even like the outreach program. So like we have an organization called Plateau Outreach Ministries that I've worked with and done some activities with. They want to be involved and they want to be a part of the community, these community services that are within your town, within your city, that are trying to provide for the citizens of that area. They want to be involved within the school as well. So it can be within your building, it can be within your district, it can be with that community also that's there as well. And I know JB's done some work with parents and getting parents involved within his own classroom. I know elementary schools do that quite a bit. And here's a way to leverage that in a positive way. So JB, you want to talk about those few that are at the bottom there?
Yeah, so I mean, will there be some examples in a little bit later there around parents and families? Like, how do we kind of connect them in a new way with their students, where it's not just about grades or it's not just about academic success? And we're going to see an example later of how, as a school, we reached out to local businesses and continue to do that, to bring people into our schools, to open up our doors to them, as well as youth programs. And just to kind of echo what you were saying earlier, like making these connections, it kind of really comes with the idea of reading the world around you, right? Like I have 3 kids at home. And sometimes I put on that teacher hat and I listen to the conversations they have or the things that they're begging for me. And there are a lot of questions that are in there, a lot of connections that I can pull from there to see what their needs are. Same with my wife when she's complaining about school, right? And I can take that and I can use that as, okay, how can I bridge that gap and move out into the local community? But really, I think a lot of it too, this connection piece, it starts with a yes, right? The best piece of advice my wife received when we moved back to Enumclaw from Southern California was, this is a small community with deep roots. It's going to be hard to break into. How do you connect with people? Well, when they approach you, when they ask you, you say yes. And so for me as a teacher, I started to take that on. And when I'm presented with an opportunity or when I'm in a conversation, I need to say yes. So it all, and I really do believe this, all of this, a lot of this starts with a yes to yourself and a yes to those around you.
Yeah, and before we move into the next piece here, and I'll maybe pause for a second and ask Jeff if anything's coming up or he has any kind of thoughts as well. But, you can look at this from 2 different perspectives. You can start with the connection and be able to say, this is a connection that I really would like to bring into my classroom. Maybe that's somebody that somehow comes up. We have your ears and your eyes open, and you're like, that's a connection. And you connect it to what you're doing in your classroom, or you have some content that you'd like to connect with something outside of your classroom, and it can start there as well. And then you reach out to people that fit with that content. So we're going to start to give some examples of that here in just a second. But before we do that, Jeff, any comments or any thoughts from your perspective on this or things in the chat?
Yeah, I just think, that idea, I love that line. Are you reading the world around you? As we talk about expanding the walls of your district, where do you, the 6 things you have on the screen are all places you can reach out to that are part of your district, part of your community. I think one of the things we found when we're going into this idea of distance learning is we are finding that we're leaning on our communities more and more, and we need our community, whether that is free hotspot for kids to connect for, families that don't have access at home, to community outreach programs of how are we helping and supporting our most needies in our community, and where does the district fall? And then where do we as teachers be able to support our kids in that and bring that into our classroom as well? I think that idea of, are you reading the world around you? I love that. And just keeping your eyes and ears open. Just a great concept.
Yeah, and I think even in this time period, especially when we're going through some challenges of what the structure and what the system looks like, we need as much collaboration as we possibly can get. So bringing in the community, bringing in parents to this. I don't think, JB, I don't know about you, but anytime I've gone to the community to ask for some support and help, I've never been told no. I mean, people want to help. They want to help. They want to get involved. They want to get engaged. And it's always been a enriched experience for my students and for me and for that person coming in as well. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about some considerations, JB.
Yeah, I think I love what you touched on there. Just the idea that if people want to help, like we talk so much about how polarized things are, but I think the reality is we are in a place where if we reach out to those people want to help one another. We want to come together. So thinking about these, considerations, the reality is we're all busy, right? Like as teachers, we are busy and we need things that are practical and that fit into our crazy lives. And so when we think about this idea of expanding the walls of our community, sometimes it can become a little bit overwhelming. So we want to give you some things to consider as you get started. You know, where do we start? How are we going to approach this? So the first thing, you know, that I think is important for us to do is always keeping that mission in mind, is just to evaluate your curriculum, right? Is to kind of pull back and think, you know, within my curriculum and what I know I want for my students, what are the set of experiences that my students need to have in order to, and then you fill in the blank, you know? And then from that, we start to think about community. Well, when I think about the experience that I want my student to have, how can I use the community around me to accomplish this, to accomplish my mission, to accomplish my vision? You know, is the other thing is, like, I was guided for so long by my curriculum. My curriculum owned me, right? And I think we have to kind of shift our mindset, especially now when I think we have more of a freedom to reimagine, to recreate, and to push the envelope. You know, I need to take ownership of my curriculum. You know, for a long time, and even now, I'm really starting to figure out, like, I have to determine what I believe is most important for my students, and what are those experiences that they need. So evaluating your curriculum is key. The second piece there is just the idea of evaluating your connections. And as we mentioned earlier, we cannot do this kind of work alone. We absolutely 100% cannot do this kind of work alone. And for me, it took me the courage to ask, like, we need support. I was a prideful person, didn't necessarily want to ask. I was a do-it-yourselfer. That's how I grew up. But we can't do this work alone. So we need to ask, like, who do I need within the school system, you know, to help create this experience or make this successful? And also, who do I need outside of the school system to make this successful? Because the reality is there are people who are itching to get into the schools because they understand the importance of what we do, whether it's at the elementary, the middle, or the high school level. And then the last piece here is just this idea that, you know what, there's going to be some stumbling blocks. There always are. It could be a personal stumbling block. It could be a very real one. But, you know, one of the things that I'm always, you know, wondering, okay, will they buy in? And you fill in the blank for the they, right? Like, will my principal buy in? Will the students buy in? Will the parents buy in? And I can go down the line and let you know that I've had different experiences, and I currently have a principal who's amazingly supportive. She is the person who says yes, right? And those are just little things that, you know, if there are any administrators out there, people like that, that yes is so huge for us as teachers at any level. You know, so there's that piece. And I always, my big thing is, like, shoot, are the students going to buy in? You know, we've done open mics down at, like, a coffee shop or down at a fudge place. And my biggest fear is that no one's going to show up, but you got to take that risk, right? You got to take that risk. And then the other piece is always the time piece. How in the world am I going to fit this in? How in the world am I going to fit this in? And that's, to me, that's always that red flag, that indicator that I'm being driven by curriculum versus, if this experience is worthy, then it's worth the time, right? So those are those big things, you know, considering your curriculum, the connections that you can make, and what are those roadblocks, and really kind of self-assessing.
Oh man, you just nailed that one. You nailed that whole process. Like, that was amazing. I even know what was coming, and I was still, like, amazed by it. That was perfect. So especially that last part, you know, it is worth the time, everybody. It is worth the time. Experiences are what our kids remember. That's where they learn. That's the power of it. That's where they're engaged. So please make sure we understand that it is always worth the time as we do that. So, you know, knowing, you know, that we're talking about, you know, these most important considerations to consider, and, you know, it allows us to have that vision of what we want to have in our classroom. The next step is, how do we change vision into reality, right? What does it look like? Okay, what is that scenario going to look like? So let's talk about some of these celebrations, okay, and some of the things that, you know, we've done, that JB has done, that I've done, that we've done together. That's been the coolest part. Is, I think it was a couple of years ago or so, I think I reached out to JB and just said, hey, I got this idea it's kind of crazy. I'm not sure. Hey, what do you think? And, and that's what I know, when you talk about who can you count on, who's that yes person, who's that colleague that's there, JB is one of those ones for me that I know there's going to be able to come back and say, you know what, let's just tweak it a little bit and do it this way. And so it was awesome. But so what are those things look like? What do those things look like? And I'm going to let JB kind of start us off, because some of these are some amazing things that he's done and he's put together. By the way, on this slide deck, I don't know, Jeff, did we put it in the chat, or is that available? Can we do that out there? I think I sent the published one to you, but if so, there's a bunch of links that are in here that I'm going to show a couple of them to you as we go through here. But if we don't show them to you, you have the access to them and you can be able to get that. And then, hopefully Jeff will put our emails in there as well. So feel free to email me at any time if you have any questions. So JB, what are some of these awesome celebrations here?
Yeah, so, I mean, I could honestly talk about all these all night, but I'll try to kind of go through it because I know people's time is valuable. But open mic, I alluded to this earlier, and this is one where my principal was fully on board, fully supportive. Students had a poetry unit. They created, their own independent voices. And when I think about this, student voice, right? Like the experience that I want students to have is for them to use their voice in an authentic way. And what better way for them to express themselves down at a coffee shop, down at a fudge place, and to share their voice, not just with their parents, not just with their family, but with people who just come into the coffee shop. And I didn't know if anyone would show up. And it started the first year with about 30 kids and about 50 adults. And then the next year it grew to about 40, 45 kids shared their original work. And it continued to grow and it continued to grow. And it's just one of my favorite times of the year. We're trying to figure something out through Zoom, how we can make this work this year. But this is one of the ways that we've been able to build a bridge between our school and the community, and bringing the students into the community to kind of show them off, honestly, quite frankly, and to give those students that experience of being out somewhere and sharing their perspective on the world around them. And the cool thing, one of the outgrowths of this was I actually had a librarian at one of the local elementary schools contact me and say, hey, you're doing this at the middle school level. What did you have to do? How could we maybe make this work at the elementary school level? And so we kind of talked through some of the logistics. And so they were looking into having an open mic night at their elementary school, opening up the library and kind of seeing how that went, possibly the NPR. So this is just so transferable. And if I can have students who have these experiences coming up, what a great piece to give the community. The next one, parent and teacher engagement. I talked earlier kind of about this idea that sometimes we think that expanding the walls of our district means going big and going to coffee shops or going to this and, doing something big. In this case, when I think about parent and teacher engagement, we're thinking on a smaller scale here. We're thinking about engaging parents and students in a different way. And for me, as a parent myself, I am dreading the time when my students get old enough where they don't want to be around me anymore, right? Where they grow apart. It's like, dude, you are not cool anymore. You've lost your luster. I'm over you. It's going to happen soon, unfortunately. But one of the things that I'm in anticipation of that, listening to that, how can I bridge this gap between student and parent? And so a couple of things that I've done. One, social media and phones, students on their phones, is a huge problem to parents, reality to students. And so I thought, all right, well, one thing I can do is have them watch videos, like a Simon Sinek video of millennials in the workplace, watch that together, have a conversation around it, type your responses, we'll share it in class. Awesome. Parents love that, kids didn't. Here's the next one. The next one, though, students love their phone. They love being on their phones. And one thing that I decided to do was to leverage that in a way that could bridge the gap between parent and student. And so while teaching the 3 persuasive appeals, ethos, pathos, and logos, I thought to myself, okay, I could have students, right, ask their parents for something.
I love this, by the way. This is my favorite. This is one of my favorite stories he tells. All right, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just had to say it. I was so
this
excited.
Is like one of my favorite lessons of all time. I love this. So I'm so excited because I know what's coming and it's so good. So sorry to interrupt.
Me too.
So the vlog is in there. I don't think we want to spend too much time on it, but the reality is, okay, all right. So I had students craft text messages right? Using the 3 persuasive appeals, and then text their parents and ask them for things. And so, kids are asking for gaming systems. Kids are asking for, can I stay up later, or can I do this or that? But then you have kids who are completely off the charts, and they're asking for things like a snake. Then they don't want a cage. They want it to roam around the house so it can be like rodent control, right? Then you have another student who's asking for a miniature donkey, right? Here's the crazy thing though, right? The miniature donkey, mom responds back, if you can find out whether or not it's legal in the city limits, then yes. Student goes out, yes, it is legal. Student gets miniature donkey. It's crazy. Yeah, so I mean, literally things like that. But here's like the fruit of all that expanding the walls of your district is, I had students who their response to me was, I feel like an adult, or I sound like an adult when I'm talking to my parents. And oh my gosh, my parents are talking to me with more respect. So it starts to build that bridge. And the coolest part is getting emails from parents or seeing them on the street and what did you do to my child? Right? What is wrong with my kid? Because all of a sudden they're talking to me like an adult. And so those things are transferable skills that can last far beyond my class. Anyway, so that's the gist of that. There's a vlog in there that kind of shows you a little bit more and takes you through a little bit more of that. But that's another.
Well, and the other thing I love about this, one of the things we talk about all the time, like I preach this so much, but this idea of how are we inviting student culture into our classrooms? And what a perfect, beautiful, persuasive text messaging, a skill set that a generation is going to need to know. And you're right. They text all the time. So why don't we bring that into the classroom, show them how using these different persuasive approaches can work, like they're theory-based approaches to persuading people to do something that you want them to do in a medium that works. Like the difference between doing this in a text message and having kids write a persuasive paper. And I want kids to write persuasive papers, 100%.
Yeah.
But what if I start with, look how powerful this is on your parents? Can you imagine what you could do with other people, and you build that experience with kids. Unbelievable. I love it. A miniature freaking donkey, dude. How crazy is that?
So insane. Yeah. And that was the point right there. It's like, we're going to take this small chunk. It's going to be this foundational exercise that gets you into it. And then you're going to take it and you're going to expand it to an argument. Right. So yeah. And then we, 8th grade exit interviews. Man, this is a kind of something that we started in Southern California when I was teaching down there, and it's still continuing on in Southern California. But this idea of what are the set of experiences I want my students to have? Well, this grew from a conversation that I had with my dad probably about 15 years ago. And one of the things that he said to me was, he said, JB, listen, he's a small business owner in town. He says, dude, like kids cannot interview. They do not know how to answer questions in an interview. They don't know how to fill out a job application. There's all these just like super relevant skills that they were coming to him. And from his perspective, they just didn't have the skills. And so at first I was like, well, don't blame me. But then I was like, okay, well, listen, how can I create experiences for these students that are going to set them up for success later in life? And so that's what we did. We created 8th grade exit interviews where students create portfolios. They used to be paper. Now we move them to online portfolios. And this is an opportunity for them to reflect on their middle school career, get interviewed by a member of the Enumclaw community that they do not know. That's one of the requirements. They're given the questions in advance so that they can prepare responses for these questions. And then they use their portfolio within that interview. And I think there's a lot more that I could say about this, but this is just one of those examples of students dress up, shirt and tie. As teachers, we come together as a community to, if you don't have it, if you lack that, we bring in the clothing for you. We bring in the things that you need to set you up for success. So I know that Steve has a little video here. Might want to say something about that, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I want to just commend JB for putting this together. You talk about this idea of, telling your truth and, trying to get students the opportunity to do that. I mean, JB's kind of telling his truth right here, right now about what he's done in his classrooms that are authentic learning experiences and opportunities for him. And what I love about the 8th grade exit interviews is JB they involve like other teachers, like teachers from the high school, I think teachers from the elementary school, you have community members that come in. So rather than the students going out into the community, you're bringing the community in. So you're fostering that relationship as well. And as we play you this portion of this video, I want to make sure that we're grasping the hold of the idea of how much this impacts not just the students, but how much it impacts the community members as well. So just a couple of minutes, but I think it's valuable and important for you to see.
You guys have worked really hard, and just know that I'm super proud of every you, right? Because you have not just today, but all year long. So let's everybody take a deep breath. Let's take another one.
Nervous. I kind of had to like talk myself down a little bit.
Getting to prepare and make sure that you're ready for everything, and just the nerves before and all of that is just really stressful, but it's good overall.
The preparing, I was really nervous. I literally walked back and forth for 30 minutes with a friend, just going insane.
The feeling I got in my stomach was crazy, and I've wrestled for 3 years and I've never had that much anxiety.
It's not a job on the line, but it just gives them a few skills. It allows them to really reflect on their 8th grade experience and let us know, and those of us in the community, there are some teachers in there too, but those of us in the community who don't really know much maybe about what's happening in 8th grade. And I am very impressed with these students, very impressed.
My favorite part is being put into a new experience and pushed out of your comfort zone and getting to talk to an adult, which is just a really nerve-wracking experience, but overall a great learning experience.
My favorite part was when I got to explain my greatest learning experience. It's when my dad told me that if you'd rather be rich and unhappy than have absolutely nothing and be the happiest person in the world, then I need to rethink my approach.
I've been really enjoying it because it's pushing me out of my comfort zone, and I've been just talking like freely and just experiencing what it feels like to be interviewed by an adult.
I feel really good about it. I liked my person that was interviewing me. She was really nice, so it made it a lot easier.
I think that it's something that all schools should be doing because it's really preparing us for the future and just a great opportunity to push us out of our comfort zone and make us all dress nice and get to do something that will prepare us for high school in the future.
I feel really good, like I did a good job, that I worked hard for, and that I feel like I'm prepared for an interview in the future.
For me, probably better for me than for the students, just to see the enthusiasm with our 8th graders. It's like, yes, there's hope for the future. It's great.
So my favorite part, or one of my favorite parts, I guess, of that is the last community member woman there who was talking, who said it's probably better for me than it is for them. Like, this is not just about our kids. This is about connecting with the community as well. And you'll see some of that in some of the other things we're going to talk about in the next slide. But before we get to the next slide, JB or Jeff, I don't know if you have any comments on that or thoughts on that video, but.
I mean, for me, I keep running through my head, and this is you're going to get a little Jeff rant here right now. So I apologize to anybody and everybody who's out there, but the number one thing, today's Thursday, we're recording this on a Thursday, and this entire week, I have been asked the same question over and over and over from teachers. How do you get student engagement? And what we are looking at here is we're looking at how you get student engagement. You make it authentic. You use their tools. You invite student culture into your classroom. You show them how what they are learning is relevant to the real world. That's how you get kids to engage. It's the number one question. I mean, right now, where everything is in our schools and in our, with home learning or hybrid learning or whatever you happen to be in, we over and over, kids aren't doing the work at home. Jeff, how do I get kids to engage in the work when they're not inside the Zoom meeting? You make the work meaningful. That's how you do it. This isn't all the odd problems in the book. You know, here's JB, an ELA teacher who isn't saying, oh, by the way, I need you to write another report, you know? And I keep coming back, like watching that video, I'm looking at this going, that's engagement. There you go. Done. Right.
Yeah.
You set up experiences that allow kids, you treat them like adults. You heard those kids say, I got to talk to an adult and adults talk to me like an adult. And that's huge. That's so big.
Yeah, 100%, for sure. And so as we move into this next deal, JB, I'll let you set up the 8th grade blogs because it leads into what we did together, right? Yeah. Okay, so what did you start with? Because you've been doing 8th grade blogs for a little while, right? And then we contacted and got a chance to talk with one another. So what were you doing there?
Yeah, I think a part of it, just to make it quick, writing epidemic, because students are simply writing for test makers and teachers. I wanted to fix that, right? Like that's just something that's not okay with me. They need to write for authentic purposes and authentic audiences. So, blogging is not new, but why not blog? So we opened it up. And that was the biggest. We wanted to make our writing public. We wanted to make it, okay, it's not just in Mr. Blair's class, it's all the 8th graders. The eventual, we want to go bring it out to our sister middle school, Thunder Mountain, hopefully get them involved. But this also came with some failure. You can read about the failure. It had to do with a polarizing issue. Some of the really good students actually made some pretty nasty comments towards one another on the blog, but that was awesome, right? That was like the best thing that could happen, right? Because the reality is the conversation became about how do we add value to our blogs with our comments, right? Got that from Jeff, stole that from Jeff, and kind of leads into where we're going. But man, it was a doozy, ended up being a great conversation. But then we had the opportunity to go with Steve and his class and had a good experience.
Yeah, and so Jeff, I got to give Jeff credit for that as well. I mean, he's been working with us in the Enumclaw School District for a while and got my students and my freshman students blogging about 4 or 5 years ago and writing for that authentic global audience, right? That public audience. And it does change. It just changes their value of writing and how they're going about doing it. So I knew JB was kind of doing a little bit with this, and I wanted to expand the walls of my classroom to our district. Again, that's why kind of what we're talking about here. So collaboration within the district, and went, man, how powerful would it be to maybe have some of my seniors working with middle school students, right? And as a mentor, as an example, just as trying to help further them in their dialogue and their discussion. And so we talked and we chatted and we figured we could fit those blogs together with some content that fit with my AP government students. And it was a significant topic. I mean, it was, I don't necessarily need to get into what the specific topic was at this point, but it was very powerful. And when we first started to do it, JB proposed it to his 8th grade students and said, hey, we're going to blog, but the seniors at the high school, AP seniors at the high school are going to be reading your blogs and they're going to be commenting on your blogs. And if I'm not mistaken, they kind of freaked out a little bit about that, which was not necessarily a bad thing, because go back to the video that you just saw. I'm uncomfortable, but yet I'm learning a lot from it, right? And so, JB was able to help talk them through that. And I can tell you from being in my classroom, when I had my senior students reading their blogs and responding to them, that the most authentic, powerful learning was watching the students when they would go, okay, how do I say to this student what I want to say without offending them? Right? Or with not killing their idea of wanting to present things. And we were also able to say, you remember when you were in 8th grade, you thought that way also, right? Like you've grown from that point to now, right? That's how you used to think. So how do you not just tell them they're wrong, but do so in a positive way? And so that part was really just tremendous, I think, for both of us. And we eventually got to a point where we got together for a Socratic seminar. And so JB's students came up to my classroom, and you can see my seniors are sitting in the middle and his 8th graders are around the outside. And they watched my seniors do a Socratic seminar. And they had I can't remember if we did it with you or not, a shared document or not. I think you did it later, but there was a shared document that they were involved in that they were kind of commenting on, but just watching my seniors go through a level of discussion. And the coolest part about that for me is a lot of these 8th grade students, because I have a freshman AP class as well, went through that experience and came to me more prepared for what they were expectations were of kind of contributing to a Socratic seminar, because they had gone through that. And then what we eventually did, if I'm not mistaken, JB, is my seniors went down and watched your 8th graders go through their blogs, and then they gave feedback to them on, you know, how good they did and how, or whatever. And so that collaboration piece was just significant. And I'll kind of try and cruise through the rest of these. I'm looking at the clock going, JB mentioned it. We could talk about this forever because we just love it. But a fellow colleague of mine here at Enumclaw High School, at the end of after the test in the spring, has done for about, I don't know, 10 years or so. And there's a link to a video about it, but they put together lessons, and they actually go down to the elementary schools and they teach lessons. They spend the day with the elementary schools, like 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade. And they put together a lesson that's age appropriate, so they know what age group they're doing. So you're talking about your audience. And they go down and they spend time with it. But he even told me the other day, yesterday, when I was talking to him about this, he said, you know, one of the most powerful things is these juniors go back down there and they all of a sudden remember what the love of learning was. They actually spend recess with the elementary school kids, right? So you talk about social and emotional learning part that comes with it. It's not just about content, it's about relationships, it's about collaboration. And so that part is you know, just extremely powerful. But you can also collaborate within your building. A couple of years ago, worked with a couple of colleagues that I very much respect here. We did an Impress Me project where we were just trying to put students and give students an opportunity across discipline. It was an English teacher, it was a science teacher, and it was me. And going back to what JB said, there's things that fail, right? This was one of them. This one was a big bomb the first time we did it, but we learned a ton from it. But it was just fun also and engaging for me as a teacher, which I think then translates to students, because I get a chance to work with colleagues that are that I'm excited to work with and learn a tremendous amount from them, just like working with JB doing this. We also collaborate within the building on a Go Baby Go project. We didn't get a chance to do this. This was supposed to be last spring. Bob Kilmer and myself were supposed to go together on this, but to be able to provide opportunities for young kids, toddlers that are immobile, and be able to modify cars, like the little toy cars that you drive around, and be able to do that. And so we're kind of trying to continue working that this year, but that's just a way that you could collaborate within your building. Podcasts. I know JB's got an idea of an 8th grade podcast he wants to do, but as part of that Impress Me project, I had a student, or I had 4 students, I think it was, that decided what they wanted to do was have a voice for the arts at Enumclaw in the Enumclaw School District. And they created a Buzzcast podcast. And they went to one of our other teachers who had podcast equipment, wasn't even one of their teachers, but he had the podcast equipment. So during our Impress Me project time that we were working on it, they would go spend time with him. And I would walk by the room, like in other times of the day that they weren't in my class, and they were in there recording a podcast. And they would bring in teachers as special guests, and then they would highlight the band program. They'd highlight the marching band program. They'd highlight, they wanted to promote the arts of the time that they were here. And these were some students that sometimes had trouble engaging in a normal classroom setting, that now all of a sudden were engaged doing that because, as Jeff said, it was authentic and it was real and it was what they cared about, and what they wanted to do. And so then finally, you know, just community service projects around the community. We Nourish cooking class is something that I did for a couple of years with my freshman students. We got a chance to learn about hunger and starvation and food insecurity in our community. So they're learning about the community. They had to reach out to like Prato Outreach Ministries. And we offered a cooking class for people that were potentially a part of our Full Bellies program at the local churches. And we brought them into the middle school, and we brought in chefs. We actually even had our superintendent, Mike Nelson, if he's still with us on this, who was our guest chef for our Thanksgiving version of a We Nourish cooking class. And so he was the guest chef that was there. So you talk about a community that was a part of this, and it was just awesome, and it was fantastic, and it was great for the community and great for our kids as well. And then the same fellow colleague of mine, Todd Witzel, here at the high school that does the AP presentations with the elementary school, he also did a Voices of Enumclaw last year, where he had his students partner with our local nursing homes and those people that have been around our community and are elderly in age, and had them come in and do individual interviews with them and talk with them and learn about, you know, what it was Enumclaw, what's the history of Enumclaw, what's the history of our town. So just some great examples and some great opportunities. So again, we could talk about this forever and quite some time, but it's just cool the amount of things that can come up. So on the slide here, you can see Mr. Nelson cooking and doing the class there on the left, but the We Nourish logo at the top, that was created by a freshman student. Right, that was created by a freshman student who then went to and took that, and I sent her to our to our graphics arts design person at the district, and they and taught her how to digitize it and how to put that together. So there's just those types of authentic learning experiences that can come out of, as going back to what JB said, just saying yes, right? Saying yes to giving something a try, even though you don't necessarily know how it's going to end up or how it's going to finish. So we're a little bit behind. We're a lot behind, Jeff. I apologize, but we can talk, man, and we're passionate about it. So I don't know, any questions coming up or any things that you have?
Not any questions coming up. Pretty quiet in the chat. I think people are just, I think, you got a lot of links there on the things for people to go through. But, I just, this idea of engagement keeps coming up. And JB, I'll start with you on that. Is just, what are you seeing like in this distance learning type of thing? I think everybody's struggling with engagement, across the board. But what are some things that seem to be working for you for middle school kids, or things that you're hearing about from other teachers as well, of just getting kids to engage in meaningful work right now?
I've been considering starting to use Among Us to get more kids to come to my
Yes, I said the same thing yesterday. I was like, every kid's playing Among Us. Where does that fit, right?
Yeah, I mean that's something that I, for the first time, have been saying, like, how can I leverage this, right? And I only heard about it because of my own children, and they're like, Dad, can we? And I'm like, oh, well, let's give it a go. So I'm not gonna lie. It's been a struggle. Students are doing their work. So students are engaging the work that I have been putting forth in the videos. Like, some of them watch them, some of them don't, but yeah, it's a challenge. And so I'm having right now to honestly think about how can I, leverage things like Among Us and use that as a tool to get more kids in, because I feel like once they do show up, they're going to be hooked. And the other piece is, you go back in hindsight, and I don't know the answer, because different districts have taken different approaches. Like, you are required to show up, you are not required to show up.
Right.
I don't know what the right answer is, but
right.
That's just, kind of my perspective and what I've seen.
Yeah. But I agree with you. And I think we have to find ways, this Among Us, like, I just heard about it this week. Like, it was the big thing. And I was working with a group of teachers. They're like, yeah, the kids are telling us they're playing Among Us while they're on the Zoom meeting in class.
Yeah.
And my question is then, why aren't you using it? Like, and we have to understand, in home learning, like we are in right now, the situation where most districts are in, where kids are learning from home, every single thing you are doing, you are working with a student whose frontal lobe isn't fully developed. We know this. You are working with a student who, up until school was canceled on March 16th in the state of Washington, was forced by law to go to school. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, all of that's been taken away. You have freedom. And every single lesson that we do, every single thing we're asking kids to do, is in competition with Fortnite, Among Us, Minecraft. Like, you pick it. Yeah. And you're asking a middle school, high school, elementary brain to choose between go to class and do math or go play Among Us. And who's going to win that? And so we've got to find ways, when we talk about this word engagement, we've got to reach out to our kids and say, what are you engaging in now? And how do I make that part of the learning? What are you engaging in now? And how does that become what school is about? Because they're not going to make the right decision. They're kids. And we can't physically hold them in our classes like we were. And I think that's one thing that we're seeing is, like, we were getting engagement before because teachers could stand at the doorway and say, you can't leave until you engage, until you do the work, until you do whatever, right? And we can't do that anymore. We can't stand at the door and say, you have to do your work or you don't get to go visit your friends at lunch or whatever it happens to be, right? We had something we held over them, and we just don't have that anymore. And I love it. It's pushing us.
I know. And I love that too, Jeff. And I think the challenge is, and this is what I've been wrestling with the last couple of weeks. And I know JB and I have had this conversation, and I just put out a survey to my students, the Enum-Claw School District, we're not requiring Zooms, right? So we're not one of the districts that's requiring it. But as JB said, kids are engaging. Like, they're engaging in the learning. And so I have a significant number of students that are either, whether they're watching my videos or not, they are completing the learning opportunities. In fact, I feel like in many ways, some of them I have better relationships than I do when they're in class, because I'm having more one-on-one conversations with them, especially focusing on feedback, but they aren't necessarily joining the Zooms. Yeah. So the question becomes, why are they not necessarily joining the office hour Zooms? And what is that? Is that exactly what you're saying, Jeff? Or is it, I put out the question, many of them said, I'm not joining because I don't have any questions. And so I take that as a compliment to my asynchronous video. I take that as a compliment to my module and what I put together, that maybe they don't have any questions.
Good. They don't need they don't need me live.
Right.
Yeah.
But I also miss them and I want to talk with them.
Of course.
Right. I want to talk with them. I want to see them. And so I'm trying to figure that out. I do think though, especially at the high school level, again, elementary, middle, and they all have different things that are happening.
Right.
At the high school level, especially, they've been, going back to what you said, so conditioned, and I use the terminology of playing school, but they've been so conditioned to how things have been that it's hard for them to wrap their mind around that it's different now. That you can join with your teacher and we can talk about things and we can just discuss and talk about content or see what's going on with you. Like, that's not why they did before. They showed up because, like you said, they had to be compliant and they had to not leave. And now all of a sudden they don't have to show up and not leave. They don't have to be there. So it's a retraining for them. And that doesn't happen just because we switched a model. It's going to take time to kind of instruct that and teach that. But I think you're exactly right. We have to engage in the things that are interesting. In fact, I'm writing stuff down now about my lessons for next week. Going, all right, I got to learn about this Among Us. I got to think about Minecraft. I got to think about, how do I do that?
I think for us as teachers, it's stretching us to truly engage kids, like really get to know your kids like we have not had to do, and truly think about engagement. And that's what I love. Like, it is pushing us. And are we doing it right? No, we're not doing it right. There's no perfect, right? This is a pandemic. There's no perfect, but it is pushing us to think differently and truly have to reach deep within ourselves to say, was I actually engaging kids before? I mean, that's a really hard question when you're doing the same stuff you were doing, but they're not doing the work. So was it true engagement, or was it kids doing because they were playing school and you were holding them hostage?
Well, and I will say this. Sorry, JB, I mean to cut you off there, but I will say this about, for me, is video, asynchronous video from my students to me has been like the saving grace to this. Like, if that wasn't there, I'm not sure I would feel like they were engaged as they were, because you just can only get so much through the written text. So, I mean, I shared one, with you, Jeff, you saw it, of the creativity of students and the videos that they make, and you give them free reign to kind of do it in that way. So we're just working on something right now. We're working on our language unit in our AP Human Geography piece, and we talk about language trees, and that's kind of what they talk about. So I went, let's get them outside. Let's get them outside. You have to go outside. I want you to find a tree. I want you to climb the tree. I want you to show me and tell me what the leaves mean and whatever. And I'm getting these great videos back, right? And I get a chance to do that. And also making students reflect, right? That is such a significantly huge thing that I think we miss the boat on in education a lot of times. Is we kind of finish the assignment, we move on. Okay, make them reflect, make them go back and look at the feedback they got from you as an educator, and then tell you what they learned from that. Okay, or tell you what they're going to do moving forward. And that's been a powerful thing for me so far for these weeks.
Well, you even go back to that video we watched of JB's kids. The most powerful part of that video is listening to those kids reflect about what just happened in that experience, how I was feeling in that moment, and what am I going to take with me? I mean, that's what that video was kids reflecting on an experience, right? JB, you're going to say something.
Oh, it was just the fact, I think the current state of education in the world really is like, we're in a place right now as educators where we're completely being unmasked. And I don't mean this in a negative way.
Yeah, I agree.
Exposed.
Yeah.
And so the question is how are we going to adapt, right? How are we going to adapt and adjust to this? Because we know what's right. We know, or we don't, but we know that we want to reach these kids, and we know we have a job to do. And how are we going to adapt?
Yeah. And what I love is, is I had just today, man, today's been a fantastic day. I had 2 conversations today with 2 different districts who the leadership, like mostly principal level leadership, saying, okay, I'm looking to next year and I don't want to go back. How are we structuring things differently? How are we not, like middle school teacher today saying, we're not doing a bell schedule. And he's like, I'm freaking my teachers out right now because we're not going to have a bell schedule. All of our teachers know how to make instructional videos. We're getting really good results with instructional videos. So how do we leverage that next year in our middle school? And what does that free us up to think different? And I'm just like, man, that's where we're at. We took all of the tech skills of teachers, and where whatever your base level was is like 150 points higher than where you were, we just like exponentially changed. And are we taking advantage of that? And, it is messy. And I think one of the things that is happening right now is we are experimenting in public. because even, JB, you're in a Zoom meeting and you're experimenting with something at the same time for the first time. And there's parents listening to you on the other end, judging you. And that didn't happen in our classrooms. In your classroom, you got to experiment and try something. And if it failed, only you and the kids knew that it failed. Parents had no idea it was a failed lesson that day. Where now, if you try something and it doesn't go right, you got 30 parents at home saying like, oh my gosh, that was horrible. And that's an added pressure, 100% different pressure on educators when you're innovating in public.
I think more parents need to take my class anyway. So,
but I think that's just something that we're not used to, as teachers. It's innovating in public. Elon Musk will go blow up a rocket trying to get people to the moon, and everybody's like, "Oh, that was $1 billion. Shucks, it didn't work." And he innovates in public all the time, and is probably pretty used to the feedback. Teachers are not used to innovating in public, and that's what we're doing right now. And so it's a scary moment. I 100% see that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I'm looking at the clock and it's 5 o'clock.
Yeah,
and we
awesome,
did have on our deal to do a little Padlet interactive activity. So I don't know, Jeff, if you want to pull that and put it in there in case people want to do it later, but I'll go to the last slide here and just say, hopefully what we've done, we kind of wanted to leave just with some questions. JB and I both like questions because I think it makes people think rather than just a statement where you can be done and move on. Right. But I mean, hopefully, have we sparked an idea for you? Right. Have you been able to identify any strategies of maybe hopefully as we've been talking, you've been thinking, hey, this is somewhere that I can go to as a connection. And have you identified any overlap of your content and community and how that can fit together? So before I let JB kind of bring us to a little bit of a close here, I think Jeff just put in there. Did you just do that, Jeff?
Yep.
Put in there the Padlet. And really what I put together as far as the Padlet here, what I was hoping to be able to do in case we didn't talk as long. JB and I both said, man, we could talk about this forever, but hopefully it's still been good. But again, looking at connections, celebrations, considerations, and creation. So, if you want to, you have access to this, you can click on the plus and create something there as far as a comment that you have, who could you contact, or maybe who have you contacted? Maybe some of you out there have done some type of a connection with your community, that would be an idea that you could share. Why do you feel that this is a powerful approach to learning for your students? Giving you a chance to reflect a little bit. Why is this a powerful approach for your students? What questions or concerns do you have regarding this approach to learning? And again, as JB finishes up, I'll put my email in the chat as well. And then maybe JB can do the same. I'm absolutely comfortable. Email me anytime, to be able to throw something by me or ask something of me. And I'll let JB explain the last one, because that big on your brain is kind of a JB Blair or a Dr. Blair saying. So I'll let him kind of talk about that one real quick, and I'll let you finish it up.
We did there. Yeah. What's big on your brain regarding how you can bring community into your classroom? And for me, the question that kind of gets to that is like, what are those sets of experiences, right? What are those sets of experiences that you want students to have? So what's big on your brain regarding how you can bring community to classroom? And like Steve said, I'm an open book. If people want to reach out, if people want to connect, if people want I was an elementary school literacy coach for a couple of years. I was a middle school and high school literacy coach. So if people want to connect, I am more than willing to connect and kind of have those conversations and just be a part of this. So that's what I got there. Say yes.
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. And I keep going back to, that last one, what is big on your brain? And one of it was a conversation I had today with a superintendent of a small rural school district who he was just going, and he just started saying, he's like, what this has changed is talk about big on the brain is the idea of an open campus forever. Like, what does this do when we know that we've got technology like Zoom and instructional videos? And he goes, the pressure on high schools to think differently about what is open campus. You can, and we're talking like a small rural school district. What if, a student wants to go do an internship down at the local machine shop? It's going to be our job as education to figure out, okay, what is the credit that you get for doing that? Because you're going to be able to go down and do that and still go to your other class periods, because we have online school, we have instructional videos. Like, kids can go and do internships during the school day and still do their other classes. Yeah. And I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, like you just start thinking about, big on the brain. What's that do for a high school kid and the opportunities?
I've had sophomores reach out to me, say, hey, is your dad hiring? Right? Like,
yeah,
because I can do my schoolwork when I do my schoolwork, but I'd love to work.
Yeah. Isn't that great? And you start thinking about all these different ways where you could have kids have a full-time job or a part-time job. And how do we make that be part of the credit? And especially here in the state of Washington, where our state has come up with these right now, 7 different pathways to graduation. One of those pathways is internships. So schools are going to have to figure out, okay, how do we give graduation credit for doing an internship at a veterinary school, at working for a company, being on like whatever it is, because that is true. That is real learning happening there. And we've got to find a way to bring that into the fold. This idea that learning only happens, the thing that we blew up is learning only happens between 7:30 and 3 o'clock. And there's a bell that tells you when you learn. And that's what we blew up. And we're going to all have to rethink this idea of school and teaching, right? Yeah. Such a great time to be in education. It really is, man. I mean, it's just going to be so cool. But all right. Thank you, gentlemen. Don't want to keep you later than we promised. Already 4 minutes over. Knowing JB, he probably still has a run to get in tonight, like 15 miles or something. He's going to go for a run.
I would like to.
Yeah, I'm sure. Awesome. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Thanks.
Nicely done, gentlemen. Woo! Good work.
JB, you rocked it, man.
JB, man.